And here we are. Well, I'll introduce this week's, this is the episode 7, I believe, of the Non-Existent Story, a story listening game in which this week Hannah will tell 2 stories, or summarize 2 stories, and read excerpts of 2 stories. One of them exists, that is to say it was written by someone else and has been published and it's probably pretty good. And the other one Hannah has made up, and I have to guess which is which. For various reasons, we are broadcasting at 6 p.m. my time, 9 a.m. Hannah's time, and noon, I guess it would be, East Coast time. So we're outside of the space-time continuum, which is making our non-existent story even more non-existent. But whenever you're ready, Hannah, I'm ready to listen.
Story 1. 2 society dames meet for tea in an elegant parlor. Elegant as only a parlor could be in mid-Civil War Philadelphia. Now, normally the demands of city charity functions keep these ladies far too busy for lunch and frivolity, but today is a special occasion. One of them has just become a grandmother. They spend the afternoon gossiping and reminiscing on motherhood when by happenstance the categories merge. For Obstetrics, the Science and the Art, by Professor Charles D. Meigs, has caught both women's attention in yesterday's medical journal. Hardly surprising, of course. In these times, it behooves a lady to follow what's what in her local hospital. What's more, Meigs is an old and respected family name in their circles. Though rather less respected by our regal ladies, it happens after reading his article. Dr. Meigs belongs to a small but staunch camp which opposes any use of anesthesia during childbirth. It is an opposition about which our new grandmother has many thoughts, none of which are flattering for Dr. Meigs. The ladies engage in energetic conversation about the article. Acknowledging the topic is outside the typical repertoire of the charitable patron, they strive for precision. One rings an attendant to bring in yesterday's paper so that they might establish better discourse. At last, both ladies agree that were they to have children in a midwifery, it would not be one chaired by Dr. Charles Meigs. However, they do concede to him that doctors probably cannot transfer childbed fever from one patient to another, on his premise that doctors are gentlemen and gentlemen's hands are clean. My excerpt from this story will be read with a background music provided by Schubert's 4th Impromptus D 935, as performed by Maria Pires.
Ah.
Oh, let me start it over. I was listening to it before you called.
Now, would this be played kind of in the back room at the tea room, perhaps? Like in the background, I mean?
It very well could be, yes.
And certainly not at the midwifery.
No, not at the midwifery. Well, let me know if you can hear it.
Yes, I can hear it. It's a good volume.
Her voice trembled with an outrage of the vindicated. There, she pronounced. There is the passage to which I had referred, Ingrid. Her elegant finger jabbed at the paper on the melon bulb table, trembling as righteously as her voice. With considerably more aplomb, Dame Ingrid adjusted her spectacles and read dramatically, for she had a resonant voice that lent itself to drama. I have been accustomed to look upon the sensation of pain in labor as a physiological relation of the power or force. And notwithstanding I have seen so many women in the throes of labor, I have always regarded a labor pain as a most desirable, salutary, and conservative manifestation of life force. I have found that women, provided they were sustained by cheering counsel and promises, and carefully freed from the distressing element of terror, could in general be made to endure, without great complaint, those labor pains which the friends of anesthesia desire so earnestly to abolish and nullify for all the fair daughters of Eve. Salutary indeed, sighed Elizabeth. It is just as I remembered. Oh, my poor Felicia, that such a man might have resided over her last night. I do shudder to think, Ingrid. And it makes one wonder just why Charles's feelings are so strong. I know of very few women who, having endured childbirth without numbing benefits of ether, remember these desirable and salutary labor pains as clearly as Dr. Meigs seems to recall them. Just so, dearest, replied Ingrid in a considering tone. What's more, such is the view of, here she turned to the introduction and pronounced with relish, the professor of midwifery and the diseases of women and children in Jefferson Medical College at Philadelphia. Bless the Almighty for chloroform, responded Elizabeth. To him be the glory, murmured Ingrid, and all those who use it. Which is not to include, and Ingrid recited the introduction again, lately one of the physicians to the lying-in department of the Pennsylvania Hospital, vice president of the Philadelphia College of Physicians, prestigious member of the American Philosophical Society, Academy of Natural Sciences of Philadelphia, and the American Medical Association. Good Lord, whispered Elizabeth. All of them? All the same person, dearest. Thank God for chloroform. And so ends my dramatic reading.
That was extremely excellent, and has we can only be the desirable salutary labors is a manifestation of the life force, and freed from the distressing element of terror.
That is is an important part.
It's the most distressing elements. Well, I'm extremely diverted and entertained by these Victorian ladies and their response to Dr. Meigs. And eager to listen to the story too.
What's that?
I'm eager to listen to the next one. How much
Okay. More. All right. Story 2. One snowy New England morning, an aged farmer returns from his barnyard chores to warm his hands and read the daily newspaper. To our farmer's delight, the Times has published an article on one of his most beloved topics, the chicken egg. The column, by English journalist J.B. Priestley, is entitled The Meaning of Brown Eggs. In it, Mr. Priestley extracts the deeper meanings of American culture for his American readers by explaining their relationship with brown and white eggs. He postulates that Americans despise and throw away brown eggs because they associate the color with nature, and overwhelmingly prefer the white egg because of its sterile aesthetic. This behavior, he concludes, is most unlike the who prefer brown eggs because they all dream of one day moving to the countryside. Our farmer is bemused by the journalist's theory. He wonders why so many Englishmen seem unhappy until they've explained America, while it is the rare American that is distraught over having yet explained England. And he is further perplexed when he references the paper's produce report, noting that yesterday a dozen brown eggs sold for 3 cents more than a dozen white. Our farmer decides he must understand and rectify the disconnect between his reality and that of Mr. Priestley. Taking pen to paper, he spends the remainder of his morning pursuing the truth of the matter. His riposte at last complete, our farmer is able to continue his daily routine and wonder about his neighbor down the ice-covered road who has plans to breed green chicken eggs. The excerpt from this story will be accompanied by Mozart's violin sonatas, performed by a name I can't pronounce. Siering Hebler is my attempt at it. Can you hear it?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. The Americans, well outside the ghettos, writes Mr. Priestley, despise brown eggs just because they do seem closer to nature. White eggs are much better, especially if they are to be given to precious children, because their very whiteness suggests hygiene and purity. My goodness. Granting that an Englishman is entitled to his reflective moments, and being myself well outside the ghettos, I suspect there is a more plausible explanation for the popularity of the white egg in America. I ascribe the whole business to a busy little female, the white leghorn hen. She is nervous, she is flighty, she is the greatest egg machine on two legs, and it just happens that she lays a white egg. She's never too distracted to do her job. A leghorn hen, if she were on her way to a fire, would pause long enough to lay an egg. This endears her to the poultrymen of America, who are out to produce the greatest number of eggs for the least amount of money paid out for feed. Result: much of America, apart from New England, is flooded with white eggs. When a housewife in New York or in Florida comes home from market with a dozen eggs and opens her package, she finds 12 pure white eggs. This, to her, is not only what an egg should be, it is what an egg is. An egg is a white object. If this same housewife were to stray into New England and encounter a brown egg from the store, the egg would look somehow incorrect, wrong. It would look like something laid by a bird that didn't know what it was about. To a New Englander, the opposite is true. Brought up as we are in the familiar beauty of richly colored brown eggs, gift of a Rhode Island red, or a barred Plymouth Rock, or a New Hampshire, when we visit New York and open a carton of chalk white eggs, we are momentarily startled. Something is awry. The hen has missed fire. The eggs are white, therefore wrong. And so concludes excerpt 2 from story 2.
Wow, all right, this is going to be very hard. So I'll start by telling you what I absorbed from these very excellent and quite short, lamentably short readings. I was just settling down to be entertained for 15 to 20 more minutes, if possible. Well, so I think that the connecting currents, and it's a scenario that I find extremely interesting, is you have a person or a group of people who are familiar with something from personal experience, directly or indirectly, as part of their daily lives, and then they encounter a publication written by an expert on the same topic, but that expert, for various reasons, is outside of the realm of daily experience or personal experience with the topic in question. So in the first story, we have a group of women who are reading a man's expert opinion on how childbirth should be experienced, when by, of course, by nature and by definition, especially nature is also kind of a connecting thread, I guess, here, but he could never actually experience. So it's someone kind of presuming to opine and perhaps to prescribe what another group of people should always be doing. And then in the second one, you have kind of this, what is it? Almost this Norman Rockwell kind of scenario of like this all-American, like, I think he's a chicken farmer, right? Like he raises chickens. That's kind of the scenario in the way we start out. And then an expert publication by a certain J.B. Priestley, who's British. And there's this side note that kind of, again, gestures towards the theme of expertise, in which Englishmen need to have this like terrible need to explain America, but America doesn't seem to have any need to explain Britain. So this sort of like indifference there, it's not really so much ignorance as it's kind of something else entirely. Just a kind of, it's a very elegant way, I think, of wrapping up two kind of national mentalities. I don't know how accurate they are, but I think that it's a very provocative statement anyway, and it's kind of coyly ironic, if you will. So this expert has this whole color theory on why certain groups in the United States, and I don't know, it's hard. I mean, even though I'm in Madrid right now, I do check Facebook. So as always, color and race are very divisive topics in the U.S. and never more than this week, it seems. So it just, in some ways, it seemed somehow to resonate with that in a very, very oblique, tangential way, and a much more playful way. And the setting, obviously, I would guess somewhere, they both kind of have this timeless quality. So it could be, there's a certain Victorian formality, especially in the first one, but this preoccupation with hygiene and what it means to be healthy is a connecting thread in both, and that to me is something that's kind of a late 19th, early 20th century, as opposed to the more natural preoccupations that we might have now. I especially thought interesting in the first one. So I don't remember, this is total hearsay, and I don't remember the names or anything, but a couple years ago, I remember a friend telling me a story about, how women used to die in childbirth all the time. It was very common. And this one doctor came up with this radical theory that maybe the doctors attending the women in childbirth should wash their hands before they touch her. And he was like thrown out of like the doctors is simply like, oh, this is insanity, this is madness. And that was basically it. Like there were these, like it's just a very easy way to catch an infection. And so simply by washing their hands, like an enormous amount of deaths in labor could be prevented. So this one comment that a gentleman's hands are clean made me think a little bit about that. Just that it's kind of rescued through this sort of gesture of gentlemanliness. But I think the rhetoric in both was really interesting. I don't know, I didn't really write down questions. I was just sort of like taking notes, but maybe you could talk a little in the first one, a little bit more about how you see these ladies' reactions, because it seemed to be a little ambivalent. On the one hand, he's this respected doctor, he's an expert, he has all these titles, and as you mentioned, the sort of aristocratic, almost old South thing where the family name carries a certain weight. So, but on the other hand, there's this kind of like perplexed, almost skepticism, but not quite, in which they kind of ridicule it, but without actually ridicule. The tone is very particular. I don't know if you could describe the way in which this expert opinion is being received by these ladies, how you would characterize that.
I was struck by how they do kind of skirt topics, and there's an echo, so I'm trying to distance hearing myself from what I'm saying. So he's a man, and he's a very respected man, and he has the family name. All of these things are very important for these women and their daily lives. But they couldn't disagree more with the positions that he has taken in his medical field. And this is also in a Civil War era, like mid to later 1800s. So they're expected socially to have some involvement with the local hospitals and visit occasionally. And I pictured these big poofy gowns like you see out of what is the film?
Gone with the Wind.
Yes, Gone with the Wind, kind of sweeping down these filthy hospital aisles as they do their duty and just pay face or whatever. But so he has all of these elements that demand respect, especially in this society. But his position is an affront to what these women have experienced themselves, especially the one who just had a grandchild. And so she's appreciative. We take from this that her daughter was able to have anesthesia during her childbirth. So they have to kind of skirt the topic of directly chastising Dr. Meings, but they're very good at skirting these things because they're socialites, and so all their topics, and whenever they talk about anything, it's kind of a skirting sort of practice. Yeah,
no, I definitely that came across really well in the summary and in the excerpt. The way in which one could, everything, it has to be implied. But if you just took down what they said word for word, like nothing is necessarily inappropriate. But in the tone, all of the absurdity of the situation and their ridicule of the male experts is quite strong. And I mean, it's such a timely thing too. It made me think of two things. It made me think one of there's in Fight Club, there's a moment when Edward Norton's character slash Brad Pitt's character is talking about the, you know, when you're in an airplane and they give you like the safety warning and a little safety card, and it describes all these very like calm people who are like kind of like smiling or like calmly taking down their mask to put over their face, and like just like how completely out of sync that is with what the reality of the plane crashing might actually be like, which I thought about recently because on my flight over, and I will get back to the story, and I will get back to antebellum or postbellum or in Bellum South. But on my flight over, so I took a night flight from Chicago to Madrid on Tuesday night, and because I wanted to like be able to sleep on the plane and then like function the next day, I took like these really, really light sleeping pills that NyQuil just started selling. They're called ZZZs, and basically they don't have anything except they're supposed to help you fall asleep more quickly. So I took them and they kind of helped. I mean, I was still like really uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden there was this violent jolts, and I woke up and the plane was like shaking like very, very, very violently. With it made me think that I was going to die. And then I looked on and like the kid next to me is like crossing himself over and over. He's like this Russian Catholic kid, I guess. So he's watching a cartoon and he just keeps crossing himself over and over. I'm waiting for these masks to like come fall. I'm like, when are the masks going to fall from the ceiling? And then half the people are asleep and the other half of the people are looking around to see if anyone else looks worried or if it's just them. Because you know, with turbulence, there's like, oh, people who are used to it, and then other people who are like, we are going to die. And I've flown a lot, but I don't do turbulence well. I do think that the plane will just suddenly like fall out of the sky. It's very unlikely, but
it does happen.
It has happened, and but I mean, very, very rarely do planes crash over the Atlantic. The most common, and planes crash almost never. I mean, like the percentage is minuscule. But when they do crash, it's usually a takeoff or landing. So in the middle of the flight, but I'm looking over, I'm like, we're like in the middle of the ocean. Like I was like, if we need to emergency land, where would we go? Like Iceland? And I'm looking at this map that shows like the chart of the plane's trajectory, and it goes like, and then like where we are right now was like, it actually mapped it out. Like I think we went like 300 miles south, and I don't know how many thousands of feet like down or up. It felt like we were going down like precipitously. So I'm just sitting and like, obviously the sleeping pills do not cover this. So I just sat there in a state of absolute terror. And trying to, thought about if I really believed in God, and decided that no, I still don't. But, that I had a really good life, and so I guess it would be fine. So I kind of made my peace with death, and then I went back to sleep. And then we finally landed. But I was thinking about like all the safety videos are always so anesthetized. And just like this calm, detached manner of how one should respond in an extremely, with the distressing element of terror totally in play. There were so many. So it was like if I were to write like a review of this the NyQuil ZZZ, I would write it in the diction that you delivered, Dr. Meeks, expert in referred to it works unless the distressing if you get rid of the distressing element of terror or something like that. But yes, anyway, your story spoke to me in a deep way. Even though I've never had a child, but yeah, I'm all for chloroform and ether and morphine and all these kinds of things. But then all right, so then the second one, which had like and this is already suggesting what my guess would be of which story you wrote, but it seemed to have almost a Dr. Seussical quality to it. I think because of for some reason, laying of eggs and the way certain birds or animals are talked about in this kind of absurd yet humanized way with the leghorn hen. So that made me, I don't know, it made me think of, what is the one with, I'm forgetting all my Dr. Seuss, But well, the green egg, of course. The reference to the green egg was like a Dr. Seuss homage. Uh, and then the humanization of this kind of like this happy-go-lucky but also like very active female hen and as a personality, and then how that in turn is reflective of like United States values in different regions. Like there's this whole opening up and kind of I don't know, portrait of a society based on the behavior of certain hens and the preference for eggs. So I mean, do you think that because I don't think we really got to this, how do you think the farmer, or how does in the rest of the story, how does the farmer, after reading this this portrait of America through the lens of its egg preferences, how would this farmer have responded, given that he makes eggs, or he not makes them, but that organizes their making? Like because there wasn't as much of a sense of reception in the second one, so I was wondering how that would actually play out, either based on what you read or what else you read of the same kind.
All right, I Gus is trying to break into the room. He throws himself bodily against the door until it opens.
Oh, these are those kind.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got the impression the farmer has, I think, a good sense of humor, and he was nonplussed, I think, when he read this article. I was just thinking, if I had read an article like that about someone's critique from another country, extrapolating from the nation's relationship with eggs, exactly how the whole dynamic, the thought process worked, I would be
like he gets a lot of information from this. And one of the great things about it is that you get and it's regionally accurate, which many foreign writers don't recognize. The United States is very hard to generalize because it is so extremely big and diverse, and it's so regional. It should actually be several countries. I think that we should all secede. But he gets like a sense of like how our industry works and our system of values, like that the hygiene and purity. So there's this sense not only of like our medicinal values, but also our religious tendencies. And there is in the background and very subtly and obliquely a certain reference to color, which can only be racial, I think, in the context of the U.S. But maybe the Brit doesn't get that. I don't know. Anyway, continue. Sorry, interrupted.
But the question was, how is the farmer reacting to this article? So I think that there's a sense with farmers, at least in our culture, where they're sitting in the back and they're observing and they're providing the food for the rest of the nation, the breadbasket of the nation. But they have all of these kind of deeper insights, which they may or may not choose to tell the rest of the world or whoever would listen about how the culture really works. So it's interesting to see a farmer take on the position of the defender of the nation, as opposed to a person who is criticizing.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting to flush out.
What era is this in, roughly?
This would be probably in the late 60s, early 70s.
Oh, that late.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting. Because they both, and this was really interesting, I think that they both have a kind of timeless quality. I think that the diction of the first one suggests the 19th century or a very high society in the early 20th. Whereas the farmer and the eggs and the Brits, that could really be, I think, anywhere from like 1780 through 1980. So that is one thing that I really like, is that they're kind of they're very fluid in their place and element. So I have to choose which one you wrote, and then you can tell me about the author.
Okay.
All right, so the scenario of like a the Beneficent Society and the Tea Party and this kind of female sociability is one of these themes that I see you kind of drawn to. It reminds me of the first story that you told about the playing in the cards, or you also have this purely female world, which has its own kind of discursive rules and its own take on everything. And then it's both kind of outside and independent of like mainstream, I guess. And then so that kind of suggests you, but at the same time, like I was saying, the one with the farmers and the eggs suggests, because of the Dr. Seuss touches, also that I can't really quite describe because I'm not up to date on my Dr. Seuss. That also suggests you because you have a Dr. Seuss tattoo. So this is tricky. Yeah, I mean, you could have written, they're both very good. And, all right, I'm going to guess that you wrote the second one, the one about the eggs.
Okay, I wrote the first one.
God damn it.
But I'm extremely flattered because E.B. White wrote the second one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's a good choice. I haven't thought about him in forever.
No, from one of his essays, which, and I think I may have stolen this book from you, actually. I don't know. It's got, no, I don't think it does. No, it doesn't.
That is my book, though. Although I do have 2 copies of Speak Memory by Nabokov, one of which I gave to you with a dedication and that's back. So
I have that too. I have that one as well as an invitation to a beheading. They're sitting right next to each other. So that's my whole Nabokov collection right there.
That is, invitation to a beheading is quite good. Oh, okay, wow. All right, so that's an easy one. So tell me a little bit more. I mean, about the name of the essay. I don't remember that at all. Apparently, I didn't read that book very well, or at all.
Well, I was going for something short because this actually still ended up taking a lot of time. We really need to change this to a once a month kind of thing. It's taking over my life.
Well, you have a week off.
I know.
What I usually do is I have a week off and then I need a week to prepare. Yes, I don't know.
But it's only 2 pages long, and it's called Ripost. And he wrote it in response to this article that J.B. Priestley published in the Times in 1971.
Okay.
Writing from across the Atlantic. And I researched J.B. Priestley and his article, and I read the article just to get a better sense of the story. And it was really quite inflammatory to me as an American reader. I was very glad that an author of E.B. White's prowess decided to take on a rebuttal. It made me very happy. So
because it was so presumptuous and
dark.
And
yeah, well, there's something about, and I mean, it is tempting to take an aspect of industry of any country and extrapolate from it a greater meaning and get very dark and poetic. But that's one of the things I love about E.B. White is that he's very, at the end of the day, he's a very pragmatic writer. So he'll take on something that's inclined to dark, like brooding, inward, poetic introspection, and he kind of blasts it out of the water, but not in a cruel way. He does it with humor. So he talks about the different kinds of hens and their egg-laying tendencies. And he says, as I referenced the produce report this afternoon in Boston, I see that brown eggs are selling for 3 cents more than whites. So I don't really know. And so he just kind of brings light, I feel, to these darker introspective writings, which I very much enjoyed. So I thought that was very excellent. And
it seems to me to be like a kind of like one of our stronger veins of specifically North American, like U.S. literature, is this kind of a pragmatic satire. Like like the U.S. would never have invented existentialism or nihilism or any of those things. But there's this kind of you could draw like from, we have the Romantics, so we do have this kind of ecstatic thing. But even that is somewhat connected to like
nature,
making a living from the earth and nature. So that's even our most romantic strain is actually quite pragmatic. Often, yeah, I would say like especially like with like the brain tree thing with Emerson and like Thoreau, like this idea, even though it didn't actually work, this idea of being able to live from like where you get berries and things like that before you have this ecstatic relationship with nature. But like I would say like from Twain and then E.B. White, and then not with Faulkner. Faulkner's quite different. But then Pynchon, for example, whom I always bring up, is also like very interested in information and an abundant surface. So he'll this just descriptive, like you said, like illuminated kind of landscape in which you get a lot of I guess local color is the kind of deprecatory way of putting it, but just like this is the information, and we kind of stay on the surface, and from this we can kind of get this more playful characterization of a conflict, and there are always, I think maybe what there are kind of like internal dilemmas. I mean, there's an interior world. I'm thinking of Trumpet of the Swan mostly when I say this, but I mean, like Louis had like real problems. But at the same time, when he got like the watercress sandwiches, he was so happy. So yeah, I don't know. Like it's interesting. And then there's I guess they're kind of like maybe many countries have this kind of like what one friend called like they're poets of darkness and they're poets of light. So I think there's this kind of brooding, maybe like Salinger, David Foster Wallace, this very dark side of American culture. I don't know who would be in the 19th century. Melville can be quite dark at times. And then we have these more kind of luminous, optimist, informed beings like E.B. White. It's an interesting dynamic. So that was what you liked about the kind of the pragmatic, non-hysterical, kind of measured response to this presumptuous.
I did appreciate it because there was still that kind of humorous jab, but it wasn't a spiteful one. It was really very playful, and I feel is the best kind of response to any sort of provocation.
Especially these days when one can respond so immediately without thinking through what you're going to say or any consequence.
Yeah, like he has another essay in here called Bedfellows, where he's sick in bed, and he says he's accompanied by all these great minds are in bed with him, and it's these different political writers on the conservative and liberal side, and he's reading all of them and appreciating different points from them. Although I think E.B. White was generally more conservative, and also he was a journalist. He wrote for what newspaper? The New York Times, I think. For many years.
I'm not sure, actually. I don't know a lot about him. I know he's from New England, though, right? Like that's kind of where he stayed.
Yeah. He
is very connected to, I think, a certain history of America. Like the essay that I remember best by him is one where he goes back to Walden Pond to visit. So I think I do associate him as like kind of an echo or a grandchild of the American Romantics. Even though he's so extremely, as you said, pragmatic. It's an interesting, I think, observation, the pragmatism. So what would you call the first one that you wrote, which was excellent, and how would you kind of end it or develop it further if you were to? Because it kind of ended, like, basically it's more of a portrait of a moment. There's it's a moment of reception that you're describing, as opposed to a story with like a development and a climax and a denouement. So what do you, I mean, is it pretty complete as it is, or would you add anything substantial, and what would you call it? These are the questions.
Okay. So I would develop it more, although as storyline wise, I don't think that it can be developed too much more. So the structure of E.B. White's essay, it's not a short story, it's called a ripost. It's a rebuttal to something. It's in response to a provocation, to make a point, in a humorous way, but also pragmatically. So the premise of the story that I wrote was really just the conversation that these two women have in response to an article that they read in a newspaper about childbirth. So it's not really a story. You have to approach it really as it is, as a moment of rebuttal. And of course, they would never publish, an article or post in a newspaper in response to a learned man such as Professor Meigs, but they amongst themselves can still have these very strong and ardent opinions about what he has to say. So that was what I wanted to capture. If I was to develop it more, maybe capturing more of their conversation, because it is really just two little kind of snippet paragraphs. To have it fleshed out completely, I think would be a lot of fun. But it would still very much.
I think it depends. It's again like its strength is the way they speak, the ironic tone, which I think is just really well done. Like that was really quite sophisticated, of this particular form of irony, which everything has kind of a double meaning and it's a little bit sly, and a little bit coy, and a little bit arch. All these other adjectives that I would find in like Jane Austen or something. But yeah, so you get a little bit more of just a fuller portrait, I guess, of the women, and maybe some, I don't know if it's necessary, but maybe a stronger sense of the place and time. Although perhaps that would be optional, or perhaps it would just be suggested. But yeah, so what would you call it then? What would the name be?
I would call it a riposte of a matriarch, because it was just a riposte. So.
Okay, and also yes, we have the autumn of the patriarch. Multiple ways, 3 dimensions, time.
Yes, very deep, very deep.
Hey, it was all right. Those were excellent, and I can understand why they would have taken you well, because they were quite well done. Next week it is my turn. I think I still need to actually post last week's as a podcast. They're always online because they automatically get added to our playlist, but they will get posted. So I will be writing one from Spain in Spain. Fortunately, I have lots of time. So, and then I think down the road we'll consider maybe having a bi-weekly or every 10 days, like a tri-monthly.
I thought we did it. Okay. We'll play with it.
Okay. All right. But excellent work. I enjoyed these immensely. So make sure you upload them to the website, and I will post on Facebook that they are there. And fortunes will rain down upon you. I'm sure this highly lucrative undertaking. Which is not the point, and that's why it's good. I know, right? We'll make it rain. All right.
Enjoy Spain. Enjoy Spain. I'm sure it'll be awesome.
Tonight I might go see a movie. There's a really beautiful old cinema that was built in 1912 that shows like and foreign films. So my cup of tea. And then also see what's there. And then the Thundercats Rock Club has a live band that comes on at 12:30 a.m. So because things start quite late here, as they should, because again it's very hot. So I might go be a rock star. I don't know. Adventures.
Oh, that'll be great. Keep all of us. Write emails like Mom to keep us posted on all of these things.
Okay, I'll probably use Facebook. It's the easiest way. I think that's why it's so popular. You don't actually have to email anyone. But yes, I will document my adventures when they deserve documentation.
Very good. Well, I will let you get on with your Spanish evening.
All right, I will let you get on with your Arizona morning.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.